After 2 years of having to go virtual because of COVID, attendees are back at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Let's turn to Business Editor Kate Moody, who is there. Of course, it's not happily ever after. China's still locked down. We are also seeing the ripple effects of Russia's war in Ukraine and its implications for the global economy.
Well, that's right, Francois. A myriad of challenges facing the international community as the business and political leaders gather here in Davos. As you mentioned there, the war in Ukraine and its implications have really overshadowed some of the other issues that were on the agenda here. The Ukrainian President Zelensky kicked off proceedings earlier on to really rousing applause. He was on video link, but the people here were very pleased to hear from him a message that was really tailored to the very special mix of public and private sector leaders that do gather here at the World Economic Forum. He was asking for more financial support, further isolation of Russia on the financial and international diplomatic stage, a total embargo on Russian oil and gas imports, and for both governments and businesses to fully implicate themselves in the eventual reconstruction of Ukraine. Now, many of the panels and meetings here will be focused on the fallout of that war for the international community, issues like soaring energy prices, inflation, a deepening food crisis that's putting already vulnerable populations around the world much further at risk. Here with me to discuss some of those issues this evening is Achim Steiner. He's the administrator of the UN Development Program. Thanks for being with us today. Let's start with the food crisis. So many economies do depend on Russia and Ukraine, not just for food, but for fertilizer and things like that. Those supplies have been disrupted. Prices are soaring. Do you think that governments and international institutions are reacting fast enough and in the right way?
Well, I think the simple answer is no, because what we have seen just in the last few weeks is not only the tragedy of the war and the consequences for Ukrainian citizens, but we also have seen that in a globally so interconnected world, the impact of disruption in supply chains immediately translates into global grain markets, and therefore we are seeing prices explode, and literally hundreds of millions of people are being priced out of their basic foodstuffs. So we have a crisis on hand. It's also the result, if you combine it with energy prices. So many developing country economies still recovering from COVID, with a great deal of debt and fiscal stress, suddenly have to find resources to buy fuel, to buy food, and they don't have the money. So we are going to see over the next few months enormous reverberations and repercussions from these developments that begin in the Ukraine and Russia, but really affect virtually the whole world.
Energy prices are also at record highs in most parts of the world. Many countries are trying, perhaps belatedly really, to become energy independent.
Well, I think the whole concept of energy security has just been put into really the center stage of world attention again. The short-term response may be to look desperately for alternative sources of fossil fuel, whether it's oil or gas. But I think there is a second interesting trend that will come with this, that energy independence also means a transition towards renewable, cleaner energies. So in the short term, this could be a dramatic crisis, first of all, in terms of the economic impact, perhaps also slowing down some of the energy transitions that have begun. But I hope ultimately we will see a realization that dependence on fossil fuels in this day and age is both from an energy security, geopolitically speaking, but ultimately also from a climate change perspective, which here in Davos is an important topic, simply not rational.
One of the things that your agency does highlight is that while there is rightly a lot of focus on the war in Ukraine and the impact that it's having on the world, there are a lot of other crises happening as well. Things like food emergencies, the drought in Africa, that increasingly pressing issue of climate change, and the situation in Afghanistan.
Indeed, I think we are living in very difficult times where obviously many countries are still dealing with a pandemic. Let's be clear, COVID is not over. But particularly the social and economic consequence, that long tail, is affecting many, many developing countries right now. And debt has become a major issue. We estimate that around 60 to 80 developing countries are now facing debt distress. That means they're a step or two away from actually defaulting. So these are mounting problems, and at the same time, yes, we have a challenge of climate change, but we also have short-term crises. Afghanistan, I was there just a few weeks ago. The United Nations is desperately trying to draw the world's attention to the fact that 40 million people there are facing an economic collapse without precedent. Myanmar, the Sahel region. And let me also say, this is a moment where really the wealthy countries are in a sense called upon to look with wisdom and foresight at how they can stabilize this situation. Your question earlier on was, are we able to respond quickly enough? No, we are not. The financial resources that the world is able to bring forward right now to deal with these multiple crises is simply inadequate and may compound the crisis that we will see over the coming months.
Do you think the international community has learned the right or perhaps any lessons from the pandemic about issues like how to approach global crises, share resources, and protect the most vulnerable?
Well, you know, as somebody who works for the United Nations, this is not an easy moment. We are seeing geopolitical tensions. We are seeing differences becoming more pronounced. And whenever the world is more focused on how to, in a sense, compete with each other or be in conflict with each other, the ability to actually find solutions like this suffers. So the pandemic was a moment in which we all thought we were going to build back better, but look at where we are right now. I think we will basically have to find a great deal of leadership across the world from citizens also to say, look, there are many crises right now, but ultimately we are bound to succeed by trying to cooperate despite our differences. In conflict, we only make things worse, and this is perhaps where we will find ourselves over the next few months, still struggling with conflicts, whether in the Ukraine or in other parts of the world, while the world economy is struggling and millions of people are becoming poorer, are suffering hunger, are falling ill. That's the balance sheet of a world that does not find a way to work together.
Achim Steiner from the UN Development Programme. Thank you for being with us on France 24. And that's all for now. Francois, I'll be back with more from the World Economic Forum all week.
Many thanks, Kate Moody, reporting live from Davos.